My name is Nicole Twing. I'm a geology supervisor with the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality's groundwater section. The DEQ is here tonight with the Teton County and the Teton Conservation District to present our Hoback Junction nitrate investigation. I did want to make sure everybody knew kind of what's going on, and thank you everybody that was able to join us on such a gorgeous summer evening to hear some information. Okay, Carlin. This project will go over the background. Back in about February of 2020, the DEQ received a complaint that requested the DEQ to investigate 2 septic systems in the Hoback Junction area. The complaint questioned if the facilities were properly permitted, did they require a UIC permit, which would be through the state of Wyoming, or would they require a county permit through the Teton County? So as in response to that complaint, the DEQ and Teton County, we conducted a joint inspection. Based on the inspection, it was determined that one facility did not require a UIC permit, that it would be permitted through the county or was currently properly permitted through the county, and that one facility also required a UIC permit. And not only that, they did have a non-permitted discharge to groundwater. Working with the property owner, the non-permitted discharge was removed. And as of today, the facility is currently in compliance with permitting requirements. There was a grace period that was given in December of 2020. And as of today, the facility is in compliance with the Teton County small wastewater permitting. So based on that first complaint, we inspected 2 facilities. It determined some permitting needs and got the one facility into compliance. Then in June of that same year, we got a second complaint that had a request for the DEQ to start an investigation into the cause of groundwater contamination in the Hoback Junction area. The concern with the complaint was requesting the DEQ to investigate and to determine a potential cause or causes of nitrates in groundwater that supply public and private water supply wells. In the Hoback Junction area, there are some instances of groundwater samples with nitrate levels that do exceed the EPA maximum contaminant level of 10 milligrams per liter. In response to the second complaint, the DEQ worked to develop a scope of work that would kind of lead and inform our investigation into the Hoback Junction area nitrate issues as a response to this complaint. Okay, Carlin? Okay, so we worked on a scope of work which was finalized in October of 2020. The scope of work is available on the DEQ's Hoback Junction Nitrate Investigation website. The purpose of the scope of work is to evaluate potential sources of nitrates in the groundwater in the Hoback Junction area. One of our first steps in our scope of work was to establish a working group, which we have done, which is a joint working group between the Conservation District, Teton County, and the DEQ. One of the steps that we're doing right now is we are compiling and reviewing all available data that we have for the area. We will be developing an initial conceptual site model. This is what's currently in development based on the data that we've been collecting and reviewing. And then hopefully, tentatively before the end of the year, we will have a draft site assessment report, which is essentially a written description of our conceptual site model. And we hope to have that at least in the draft format before the end of the year. Okay, Carlin? Our working group, it was started in response to the June 2020 complaint and our October 2020 scope of work. Members are staff from the following agencies: the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, the groundwater section, and the water and wastewater section. and then Teton County and Teton Conservation District. We hold regular bi-weekly meetings. And this is, right now, our meetings are held regarding the gathering of existing information, different data sources we're looking at, our area, and our efforts to develop the conceptual site model. Okay, Carlin? A conceptual site model, it's kind of a visual or written representation of an area, and this represents conditions that could influence contaminant migration and potential impacts to receptors. So we're looking at both surface and subsurface conditions, so geology, hydrogeology, hydrology, topography. We're also looking and describing potential sources. So what are land uses in the area? Do we have septic systems, agriculture, industrial activities, agriculture, and then also known areas of contamination. So this is some of the background water quality data that has been collected that we will utilize in our model. And then also, another thing that the conceptual site model looks at is the potential receptors. So surface water, private water wells, or your public water wells. And the conceptual site model attempts to pull all this information together so that you can understand how a contaminant source might move from a point of release to a potential receptor. And then we also utilize a conceptual site model to help us identify data gaps. So where might we need to collect additional information, or if the information cannot be collected, do we recognize it as a data gap and do we describe it? And then a conceptual site model is also, it's a living product. So as we go through this process and as we're gathering additional information, we go back and review the conceptual site model to see if we do need to make changes or tweaks to our assumptions from our contaminant transport sources and our receptors. Okay, Carlin? So this is kind of a description of our study area for the Hoback Junction nitrate investigation. You can see it is mostly centered on Hoback Junction. Goes north a little. And then we did also, as a group, decide to incorporate some of the subdivisions there south of Hoback Junction and just south of the Hoback River. In total, the study area is approximately 175 acres. There's 97 total parcels in that 175 acres. I think we've estimated 67 of them are residential properties. We have 4 commercial properties, and we have 14 that are undeveloped. And I think it was 12 of those undeveloped were zoned for residential, and I think 2 were commercial. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ted.
No, I think that's right. There are also some exempt parcels in there, so it doesn't always add up exactly.
Exactly.
Government parcels are exempt.
Okay. And within our study area, based on the information that we do have from one of our data sources, which is the state engineers department that does the permitting for the water wells, we have 48 private water wells, 2 public water supply systems, and in those public water supply systems, there are actually 3 wells associated with those 2 systems. Okay, so this is kind of the elements of the conceptual site model for the Hoback Junction area that we're looking at right now. We'll be doing a description of the project background, the study area, and the working group members. You know, how did we get here to develop the conceptual site model? And then we'll be going into a description of the study area, the topography, land uses, our climate, the hydrology, so your surface water and your watersheds, geology. We'll be looking both at superficial geology and bedrock. And I do know in that area, especially up in anywhere in Teton County, it is kind of complex geology. We'll also be looking at your hydrogeology. So what are the aquifers? Where are people pulling water from? Do we have information on depth to water and water uses? And one of the things with hydrogeology, we were hoping to also estimate not only the water uses, like who's using the water, but also kind of get an idea of how much water is being utilized. Then we'll also be looking at potential sources of nitrates. So we'll be looking at the UIC facilities, septic systems, agricultural activities in the area, atmospheric deposition of nitrates. Do we potentially have a naturally occurring geologic sources for nitrates from any of the formations in the area? Surface water, groundwater interactions, and is there a surface water component of the nitrates? Do we have wastewater treatment plants in the area? And then also like miscellaneous discharges. So landscaping, pet wastes. In landscaping, that's from those really nice lush green lawns that we like, that get treated quite a bit. Although from aerial photos, it doesn't look like that's happens much up in Teton County in this particular area. And then we'll also be looking at existing water quality data. So both surface and groundwater, what data do we already have available? Then we'll be describing data gaps for the area. And then we'll be having a discussion on the conceptual site model. So this is the pulling together of the data. Where does the data lead us? Where does the conceptual site model lead us? And then after the discussion, we'll be making recommendations for future activities in the area if the conceptual site model leads us to, and our data gaps lead us to the determination that we do need additional investigation. Okay, Carlin. So right now, we have some ongoing work that's happening as part of our work group. We're completing compilation of the site data. We're reviewing the data and drafting our site assessment report. After we get a draft report together and through some internal reviews, we will be putting out the draft site assessment report for public review. And at that time, we will hold another public meeting. And then after public meeting and any comments we get, we will be finalizing the site assessment report. And at that time also, we will be doing another meeting at the release of the final site assessment report. Some of the challenges we've had that as we've been pulling together this information for the Hoback Junction area is there's a very large lack of very site-specific data on a local scale because we are dealing with such a small area compared to how data sets in Teton County, especially like geology or hydrology, are generally generated. They're more generated on a larger local scale or even a regional scale. So having kind of that very site-specific information, it's been very hard to pull together. Another is lack of recent groundwater elevations. A lot of times, the data that we're going to be using for groundwater elevations is the data that was recorded on the SEO well permit at the time the well was installed. And some of those water well elevations could be 30, 40, 50 years old. So when we're dealing with data like that, there's going to be a lot of caveats and assumptions that get made. Another one is incomplete water well logs. So when a water well gets installed, the driller is supposed to submit a statement of completion to the SEO. And we've been finding that with a lot of water well logs, all of the construction information for those wells has not been included on the permits. So that, that leads us to, can we use this information if we don't know exactly where the well is screened, so where they're pulling water from. And then another issue is we have a lack of pre-existing water quality data from private water wells. Again, with the SEO logs, a lot of times a box gets checked that the water quality is fine, but then there's never any laboratory data attached to that. So we don't have any sort of pre-elevated nitrate levels really to go back on, except for some of those public water supply wells that are required to sample as part of their EPA requirements. So that's just some of our challenges right now. We do have a project website. The link is here. You can also find it just by Googling WDEQ groundwater Hoback Junction, and it'll bring you to, one of the links will bring you to the Hoback Junction nitrate investigation. The website has the complaints that precipitated this investigation. It has a copy of our scope of work. When we do remote meetings such as this one and they're recorded, they will be posted. Links to the meetings will be posted there. It's a place where you can find notification of meetings, DEQ contact information, and like I was referring to earlier, project documents such as our scope of work, the complaints. And as we're finalizing our site assessment report, the final report will also be posted on this website. Okay.
Nicole, I might just add that it's also a location where you can add your contact information to be given updates on meetings as well.
Yep. So yes, see, there you go. Sign up for the email list service. We do have an email list service on our website that you can sign up for. And then when we have notifications of public meetings or when we're going to be releasing the final document, you can get an email notification for the meetings going forward. You were reading my mind, Carlin. Okay. So our project contacts at the DEQ, we have Lily Barkow, who is on the call. She's the groundwater section manager. Myself, I'm the geology supervisor for the groundwater pollution control program. And then we have Ted Von Holland with Teton County, and then Carlin with the Teton Conservation District. I did want to make note too that I am aware, and our group is aware, that there is a bunch of projects that either have happened in the past or are currently in process. Maybe not at such a local level as what our project is. So here is some links like the water supply master plan from the Hoback Junction water supply study. We have the Hog Island, and there is work being conducted for special district formation for the Hoback Junction area, my understanding. So there's a link to a website there for getting involved. The Conservation District is working on a water mapping project. And then the county and Conservation District is doing a joint septic effluent study. We don't have a link for that yet because I believe Ted and Carlin, you guys are still in the process on that project. So there's nothing really to be released yet. And then there is a Teton County Comprehensive Water Quality Planning effort, which that is an initial development in my understanding with the Water Development Board. That's the Hoback Grays River project. I did not have a link for that since that's still kind of in the initial development. And I believe they held a public meeting a couple of weeks ago for that particular project. And then there's also the Teton County Health Department's Hoback Water Project.
Nicole, I'd like to add that we might need to revise this slide a little bit. There are two different efforts there. One is a Wyoming Water Development Commission study of the Hoback and Grays. there is a separate, completely separate Teton County Comprehensive Water Quality Planning effort.
Okay.
And we have just let out a request for interested contractors to provide their qualifications. So that has been released so that we can hire a consultant to help us through that project.
Okay, Ted, if you wouldn't mind getting me that information, I'll add this to the slide so that when I post this up, that corrected contact and information is on there.
Absolutely.
So that I am clear that there's the two different projects.
Yes.
And one thing with some of these other projects in the area, we're hoping that the work that they do can help inform our project. And they are also hoping that at least on the local level, some of the information that we are going to be pulling together could help to inform the project they're doing. Okay, so that is essentially the end of the presentation about our project. I know it's a very high level overview because we are just getting started at this point with the development of the conceptual site model and the data that we're looking at. So I really hope with our next meeting, we'll have much more data, figures, and probably more interesting stuff to share. So at this point, did anyone have any questions? Not hearing anything. Thank you, Carlin, for jumping on and doing the presentation. I'm sorry about that gremlin that just decided to happen right there at the start.
Not a problem at all. And I'm not seeing any questions currently listed in the chat box either.
This is Aida. I was typing a question.
Oh, okay.
There we
Hello.
go.
I can just ask it if you prefer.
Yes.
So I'm curious, for the conceptual model, will that be based on data from samples that have already been collected, or is any sampling happening as part of this?
At this point in time, no additional sampling is going to be conducted as part of the development of the conceptual site model. The conceptual site model is developed based on existing information, and then it will help us inform data gaps, and then potentially utilize that for data gaps and recommendations for future activities, which may include sampling.
So with that in mind, what kind of a timeline, and I know it's difficult to estimate these things, but what sort of a timeline do you expect before you understand whether you have enough data to move forward?
We're hoping to have our report done in draft format, which usually at that point, we have a pretty good idea and things don't change too much, but we would have a good idea by the end of the year. For our recommendations for moving forward.
So if you felt like you needed sampling, that wouldn't happen until after the first of the year, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Are there any other questions at this point? Seems like we're good. Is there anything, any other closing comments? Anybody from the project team?
I did want to say, you know, this isn't going to be the public's only opportunity to ask questions. you know, if you are thinking later after the presentation, if you do have some questions that come up, don't hesitate to reach out to our group members to ask your questions, and we will strive to get back to you in a timely manner and answer your questions to the best of our abilities.
Thanks, Nicole. And, you know, just to reiterate, there's multiple avenues to provide input. Definitely feel free to reach out to any of us. And I think at this stage, what we're most interested in is if the public, if people who are involved in this area feel as though there's elements of our conceptual site model. So us pulling together informations that are currently lacking or need to be covered. So to me, I just wanted to reiterate that at this stage, we're very interested in if the overall proposal of information being collected is complete, and if not, now is the right time to provide that input. But if there's no more questions, I think we'll stop recording and appreciate everybody's time this evening.
You know, I'd like to pose a question, and I'm looking at the names of the people that are on here, and a lot of them are familiar to me. There are some DEQ members, there are other local people, one of our commissioners, and some other what I would consider insiders. I don't know if there's an easy way to identify. Are there any people that live down in the Hoback Junction area? I know people on the phone might not have an easy time identifying that.
I do. I live in Hoback.
Great, great. Well, welcome. You know, this is especially for you guys as it affects you. I mean, it's really for everybody, but I personally am really glad to see people from down there taking the time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, should we sign off?
Perfect.
Yep, I would like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And like Carlin and I had both said, that if you do have questions or think of something, don't hesitate to reach out. And I do believe the kind of a draft outline for our conceptual site model, the information that we're including is on that project website.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, guys.
Thank you all for
Thanks.
attending.
Yep, thank you too. Hope you all have a good evening.
Okay.